listen. Don't come in talking, letting everybody know how much you know or what you think, but listen to the people who are doing the work.
Welcome to Friday 5 with Dave Adams. In this edition, I'm looking forward to a great conversation with CEO of Gerber Federal Credit Union, John Buckley, and a good friend of mine. John has served at the credit union as CEO for 14 years, since 2006. The credit union has close to $200 million in assets, 15,000 members, and 48 employees. He has also served in the industry on the Michigan Credit Union League Board of Directors, including a stint as chairman, 2016 to 2018, as well as serving currently on the CU Solutions Group board. What's unique about John, but is similar to many within our industry, John also did a long stint, 19 years, in the community banking sector, including serving as community bank president for 3 separate banks. He is a Rotarian, has been since 1994. He's active with the United Way and other community groups, including serving as vice chair on the Newaygo County Economic Development Advisory Board. I know we're in for a real treat to learn more about John, his perspectives on leadership, and how he and his credit union are dealing with these extraordinary times during this pandemic. Well, John Buckley, welcome to Friday 5 with Dave Adams. It's great to have you on.
Good to see you, Dave.
Let's start with just asking how you and the family are doing personally as you deal with this extraordinary pandemic environment that we're living through.
Everyone's healthy. My wife babysits the 2 grandsons down in Muskegon, where my daughter works for Lakeshore Federal Credit Union as a chief accountant. Our son is out in LA, been working through the whole thing, and actually will be coming back for a week vacation this Saturday. So we're looking forward to seeing him.
Awesome. I know you're very family centric, and it's a blessing to have family within striking distance. And certainly one of the silver linings of the pandemic is that we're able to spend a bit more quality time with our loved ones. Let's talk about your career journey. I've been very fortunate to know you for a number of years, to work with you on the MCUL and CUSG boards. And I know that, like many of us, you started your career in the banking sector and then transitioned to credit unions. And as I said in the intro, you served as a community bank president for, I think, 3 different community banks. And so I think it's been about 14 years that you've worked in the credit union industry there at Gerber as CEO.
Correct.
Just talk to us about your career journey with an emphasis on your credit union path, but also I think it would be interesting to hear your perspectives on what the transition was like coming over from the banking sector.
Okay. Grew up in Washington, D.C., Bachelor of Arts in Econ from Notre Dame, as you well know. MBA in Finance from, MBA in Finance from Illinois. And then Old Kent Bank in Grand Rapids recruited the Big Ten MBA school. So I started there in the summer of '84. Worked my way up in Grand Rapids, and then joined the Cadillac affiliate as senior lender, and eventually became community bank president there. Left when I saw some changes coming that I didn't like. Moved to Indiana for 3 years, community bank president out there. Family didn't like Indiana, so we moved back. Worked for First Bank, now Mercantile, for a little over 3 years, and then did some consulting for a year, and then found the Gerber job. And it turns out that because my wife grew up in Holton, which is right across the county line from Fremont, that we knew some people who happened to be on the board, and that made that transition really, really easy. And I've absolutely loved it ever since. So that's coming up on 14 years on September 11th.
So what is your observation and maybe your thoughts regarding coming from the banking sector, the pros and cons maybe? I know there are a ton of positives working in the credit union industry. We love it. But as you made that transition, were there challenges that went with that as well, or how did it go?
I remember one of the board members was impressed during the interview process that I kept talking about members versus customers. So I had done my research and got that part of it right. When I go into high schools and make presentations, I tell them that banks and credit unions do the same things. It's the Simon Sinek why we do it that's different. So we take in deposits at a certain rate, we lend them out at another rate, and we basically live off the difference. And that's what we do. There's a few fees here and there, but we do it for the same group of people, the owners of the institution. The difference is that the bank's owners are stockholders, and the credit union's owners are the depositors, and that's critical. So it's all about culture and mission, and that's the difference. And I remember my community banking days, how much fulfillment I got from doing a big deal and really building the community and seeing the growth and whatever. And then corporate would push down some sort of a policy where we were increasing fees on everybody by 10%. And it was just gutting the relationships that I had spent so much time building up. You don't see that in the credit union world. The other thing I'd point out is the camaraderie that exists within the credit unions that you don't see in the banks. So I had been here not even 2 months in Gerber, and I really didn't know. My second day on the job, I went to a Moon Chapter event, and I'm just, my head's swimming, just trying to figure out what's going on. Met all these people, they're all very, very kind. But I got a call from Daniel Wyhand, who was the president of United Federal Credit Union down in Benton Harbor. And his credit union was approaching $1 billion. He had no interest up in this part of the state, but he was just calling to offer his guidance as a credit union veteran if there are any questions that came up. And I was just so struck by that. And I think within the next month, he passed away. It was soon thereafter. And I was just struck that with everything going on in his life, he took the time out to contact me, brand new credit union CEO. And that type of spirit is endemic to the movement.
That's a great story. And it really is the people, right? It's the people we work with. It's the members we serve. And
it's the only underlying difference. It's the only underlying difference.
And you gave some good examples of how that credit union difference is something that you noticed right away. How does it play out at your credit union, the credit union difference, Gerber Federal Credit Union, and in the way that you serve your community and you serve your members? How does that credit union difference, how is it really truly different from your community bank experience?
I guess I'd point out two things. One, we are the largest depository in Newaygo County. So we're the big dog. And so we kind of set the tone and the tenor. We do a lot of community involvement, and we make a lot of contributions to community institutions and the like. And because we're headquartered here, we have support staff and administrative staff that can get involved in the community. Whereas the other banks and financial institutions in the area might have a branch, and so they have a branch manager, and that's all. Well, I've got branch managers, I've got VPs, I've got AVPs, I've got all kinds of people who are involved in churches, in nonprofits, in social service agencies. So we really have a broad reach that way. The other thing I'd point out is that how we really address our membership. We have members in 49 states and Puerto Rico. We haven't been able to crack the Vermont market. I'm not quite sure why. I'm working on that. But at one point, Gerber had a furniture manufacturing facility in Puerto Rico. So I still have 9 members in Puerto Rico. And back when Hurricane Maria, I think, hit down there a few years back, it really knocked out everything for several months. And we had a member down there who got a hold of us and said, I can't work. I'm going to have trouble with the loans I have. So we were able to rewrite the loans. The tough part was getting a document because we hadn't gone to electronic signatures yet. So we had to jury rig some things, but we rewrote the loans, bought him 90 days until things get going again. And a bank never would have done that. They just wouldn't have done that. They might not have collected on it, but they would have ignored the guy, let his credit go to pot. And this way we were able to save his credit, give him some peace of mind. What I tell people when I get that question on the airplane, well, what do you do for a living? I tell them my job is to help people sleep better at night.
Oh, that's awesome.
And
That's a
and
great credit union slogan.
that's what we do. We help people sleep better at night, at least as
And,
far
and
as
I,
their finances go.
in my observation, even larger credit unions, but especially mid-size and smaller, don't spend a lot of money on marketing per se, but word of mouth advertising and the reputation that spreads from those individual stories, like the
Hmm.
one you just relayed, are really powerful. So let's talk about leadership. You had your banking sector experience. You have your 14 years with the credit union. You've been a volunteer in your community, continue to do so. You've been a volunteer leader in the credit union industry, having served as chairman of the Michigan Credit Union League. And when you reflect on leadership, what are a couple of the valuable lessons that you feel like you've learned from your leadership journey?
Probably two main ones, and the first one I'd say is listen. Don't come in talking, letting everybody know how much you know or what you think, but listen to the people who are doing the work. I tell my folks here that a teller will see more members in a day than I'll see in a year. And we've got to do everything we can to make it as easy as possible for our tellers and MSRs to do the best job possible they can, because that's going to have a lot more impact on how well the credit union does and how it's perceived in the community than anything I do. So listening is absolutely critical. The other one, and I've been an adherent of personality profiling for about 21 years. At one of my other stops, we got involved in a program, and I've had it at subsequent stops, then brought it here. And I'm a real big believer in trying to match up people to things that don't cause them stress, that they're going to be good at least from a personality fit standpoint. And the lesson, the takeaway from that is one of self-awareness. So as a leader, it's not so much that I tell you something and that you then have to do it. It's that I need to communicate on your level with the type of information and in a way that causes you to be responsive to that. So as an example is if I'm dealing with somebody who's very detailed, I need to give them all the background that's necessary so that they feel confident that they're not going to get the answer wrong when they go out and do their research. Versus if you're talking to me, I just want the bullet points. I want the high level, I want the bullet points. I'll let somebody else worry about the details. But that's incumbent on the person delivering the message, not on the receiver, to get it right. And that takes some self-awareness to get away from how I like to hear and deliver message to the other person.
I like that. And I think we've all been guilty of trying to put a square peg into a round hole and trying to put people in positions that they're not particularly well suited for. And it does a disservice to them and it makes things more difficult in the organization. I also like what you referenced about being self-aware, because as leaders, we also need to realize that surrounding ourselves with people who are stronger in areas where we're not particularly strong makes sense. Those are really great perspectives. So in this environment we're in, it's one thing to lead and manage a credit union with your team in a strong, kind of normal economic environment. But the pandemic has changed the way that we have had to operate very abruptly. And now it continues on into what we feel is going to be a recession for at least a period of time. Nobody really knows how long. So how is that changing the way you approach business at Gerber Federal?
I think from the time the pandemic hit, we made it a point to try to insulate our membership from the impact as much as we could with what we were doing. So yes, we had to shut down our lobbies and go to drive up only, but we've been beefing up our member service staff. So one of the outcrops of this is that teller counts have remained lower even after we've reopened our lobbies than they were before, and in-person MSR visits have been lower than they were pre-pandemic. But the phones have been busier, so we've filled some open MSRs. We've added an MSR because of the increased phone traffic. So we're seeing that shift, and I think we're reacting appropriately to that. We're doing more research into how we might be able to offer remote member service, because we're going to get a blizzard at some point. People might not be able to get in on this side of the state near Lake Michigan. The wintertime, we can get a fair amount of snow, and we've been shut down before from that. So we got to figure out a way to have the proper technology in place with folks so they can dial in from home and still do the job. I think that it's been, those have been the biggest challenges, trying to be authentic to our staff, and we call them colleagues here. So for the colleagues to see that, and early on, our senior team got together and said, okay, who needed to come in, who needed to stay at home? And, I could have pulled rank, but I said, nope, I don't really need to be there. So I worked remotely, except for Thursday mornings. I came in and approved expenses, and that was it for 2 hours. And then I was working from home the rest of the time. And
I was
I
going to
think,
ask you with,
go
excuse me,
ahead.
so with almost $200 million in assets and 15,000 members, how many colleagues, how many employees do you have at Gerber Federal?
We're now up to 48 or 49.
Have you found, with what you just described, have you had to change people's job duties in a relatively smaller shop that you run? Because as you said, the needs of members have shifted more to remote service delivery and phones. Has there been any need to change people's job duties and job descriptions?
We've really dealt with that by attrition. So as, tellers being an entry-level position, and especially at the part-time basis, as folks figure out that they can work full-time somewhere else because we don't have a position or something, then we might not fill that, but we backfill it on the member service side to address the phone opportunity.
And what about financial metrics? A lot of credit unions are seeing a big influx of deposit dollars affecting net worth ratios. I haven't
Yep.
heard as much in terms of, a rise in delinquency and charge-offs, although many believe that's coming. But what are you seeing now, and what are you expecting in terms of key financial performance indicators?
We are much like what you've observed today. We've seen a big 20% increase in deposits that we weren't anticipating. Thankfully, we've had some good loan growth. Our loans are up between 6 and 7% compared to a year ago, which obviously doesn't make up for a 20% rise in deposits. So our capital ratio has gone down. The other thing I'm very thankful for is we completed our exam just before the pandemic hit. So we're good for another 12 to 18 months before we have to deal with the NCUA. We're looking at a very good bottom line for the year, even though interchange figures are down. Real estate, mortgage origination income is very, very strong. Expenses are down, as you well know, with the cancellation of conferences and the like. We're not traveling, we're not spending time at hotels. So that's cut expenses down. Marketing is down because there hasn't been a place to put a lot of that. And so as a result, we've been able to enhance the bottom line, but not enough to make up for the huge increase on the liability side.
So some feel like we're in the calm before the storm. Others are more optimistic. What is your outlook on what comes next, say in the next 6 to 12 months?
I'm generally I'm a pretty optimistic guy. I'm a forward-looking type person. I don't think we're going to know honestly until after the election, and then things will shake out after that. But I think everything is going to be kind of topsy-turvy until early or mid-November, and then it'll shake itself out.
Don't push me to bring up politics.
I'm not.
This has been
I
such a
didn't. I
friendly,
did.
cordial conversation. We love talking politics and everything else, but let's shift to the personal side. You talk about being an optimist. You have to be, being a Notre Dame Fighting Irish alum. You have to have an optimistic outlook with a football team like that. I'm kidding. I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk about Notre Dame and the Boston Red Sox and anything else you want to talk about. But you mentioned before we started recording that in the case of your Fighting Irish, there's actually knock on wood, going to be a college football season for them and the ACC. Is that right?
Right. That's what I understand. As of today, they've got games scheduled. They open up, I think, on the 12th with Duke, and they were playing a 10-game ACC schedule. So I'm better off than all my Big Ten friends who don't have any fall football to look forward to. And I apologize for that, but you chose your conference. I didn't.
We'll have fewer bad games to complain about, I guess, in the case of University of Michigan. But your personal loves and passions. I know you love sports. I know you're a family-centric man, but talk about your personal loves and passions.
You know, other than the ones you mentioned, and the Red Sox, I come about that honestly. My folks both grew up in Boston, and my dad has a ball signed by every member of the 1940 Boston Red Sox, so it's legit. And talk about being positive. Up until 2004, all we had to do was keep waiting for next year, and then it happened, and life's been good since. Military history. I'm a big military history buff. I used to play chess a lot, and there's a very much a military strategic side to that. We like to, my wife and I like to travel. We like to eat out, which has been obviously curtailed with the current arrangements. But yeah, just keep busy. I have found that we actually just in the last month cut the cord with television. We just didn't see the point of paying the local cable company all those dollars. And even though we've gone to a Hulu type arrangement, we're just not watching nearly as much TV. And you know what? That's okay. So I'm doing more reading. I'm doing more outside projects. I just got my welded pan to start a maple syrup operation next winter. So I'm looking forward to that. I've been splitting wood to get ready for that. So just something different to keep the mind sharp.
Well, I know you live in a beautiful northern Michigan area, and it's really been a great summer so far. So that's great to learn a little bit more about your personal interests. And I really appreciated the conversation. Maybe just to wrap up, if you think, as you think about the credit union industry and where your career has taken you at this point, if you had one piece of advice for those who are going to lead credit unions into the next decade, what would that be?
I guess I would go to the advocacy realm, and I would say get involved, because if you don't let your legislators, regulators, and the like know what you're thinking, their brains are being filled with messages from somebody else, and you might not like what they're saying. So I remember getting involved in the forum when I first joined the credit union. And one of the people I sat next to was Cheryl DeBoer early on. And she was great in terms of getting me up to speed on a lot of different things. But the people around the forum get it, that and develop those relationships with the staffers, because the staffers might eventually end up in a better position. My example of that was when I was in Cadillac. I got to know Bill Huizinga, who was staffer for Pete Hoekstra. And next thing, lo and behold, Bill is now holding the second congressional seat that Pete used to hold. And I can rely on that old relationship and have access to Bill that maybe others didn't, because it goes back and predates his time as the elected person.
And as you know, but many of our listeners may not know, Bill Huizinga is in a very senior position in leadership on the Financial Services Committee,
Right.
Although in the minority right now. And so you never know how those relationships will play out.
Exactly.
How I always use the example of Dave Camp when I first came to Michigan 23 years ago, and Dave Camp, he wasn't really on any influential committees per se, but then he became chairman of the powerful House Ways and Means Committee, and the rest is history there. Well, John Buckley, CEO of Gerber Federal Credit Union, thank you so much for taking the time to be on Friday 5 with Dave Adams. And I hope our listeners have appreciated the conversation as much as I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did with John Buckley, CEO of Gerber Federal Credit Union. As I said, I've known John for a number of years, And what I really appreciate is John walks the talk. When he says as advice to be involved in advocacy, he leads by example. He shows up, he speaks up, and he knows his issues, and he develops the relationships with people like Congressman Bill Huizenga and our Senators Gary Peters and Debbie Stabenow over many years, such that when we really need their help, we have voices from their communities and from their districts that matter most to them. I also really appreciated John's perspective on leadership, helping us remember that listening and being empathetic are just such key leadership traits, and making sure that we are self-aware so that we know what our personality traits and strengths are, and we know how to surround ourselves with people who complement our strengths and weaknesses. I thought that was great advice. I really appreciated John's perspectives on the credit union difference and how one member at a time, stepping up when our members need us, truly is the credit union difference. And then that word of mouth advertising that comes from that is what helps credit unions truly excel. So I hope you enjoyed the broadcast, and we look forward to future episodes of Friday 5 with Dave Adams. Thanks for watching.